some of us do not want to know the purposes of God. Some of us just don't want to know because it's too big for us. We can't do it. Too impossible. You're right. You're not meant to do it. I've said this before. I've said this to leaders in our church many times before. If your life, if the rest of your life, you're looking at what you can do, you are missing God. Let me say it again. If you're looking at what you can do, if you're saying no to doing different things that are too difficult, then you're missing God. God will give you things that are beyond your ability and your capability to do. Why? Because it's dependent upon Him to do. He wants you to believe and stretch in faith. Stop believing for the things that only your hands can do. Here's the problem. I'm going to tell you what the problem is right here and now. You ready for this solution? Yes, it sounds arrogant, but that's all right. Get ready for it. When we say we can do something, right? Well, all right, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. And all of a sudden our hands fail. We get afraid to make another prediction like that. We get afraid to even make another step forward. We get afraid to even predict what God can do when we can't even do what we say we can do. Think about that for a second. Doesn't that cause us to have pause? Doesn't that cause us to stop in our tracks? But again, what were you relying on when you made that promise? Was that God's promise or your promise? Was that God's glory or your glory? Were we depending and saying something we could do? Again, it was banking on what was in your bank, in your reserve, not in God's reserve. When we start tapping and believing in God's reserve, this is faith. Faith activates something different in the spiritual realm. It activates a supernatural strength. And we need to stop depending on our reserve of strength and start tapping into God's reserve of strength. Because there is great grace to do what God has called us to do. So again, don't look at your own failures or your own mistakes and pin that on God and saying, I can't do what God's called me to do because I messed up in the things that I said I would do. No. Don't base your future on your own steps. Base it on God's steps. His steps are bigger than yours. He can make leaps where you just tiptoe through the forest. He can overcome the whole forest in one leap and bound. Okay? Let's put it like this. No one pictured the world changing, right, like this in 2020. But all of a sudden, in one snap, everything has changed, hasn't it? Okay. God can do that for the good in your life and in others' life through you. Dream bigger. Dream bigger. Get God's perspective. See, this was Sarah's problem, wasn't it? Sarah in the Bible. Sarah and Abraham. God told her she was going to have a baby, and what'd she do? She laughed. She laughed. She thought, yeah, right, I'm too old. There's no way I can have a baby. Now, this is when she's like 70, 80 years old. She's hearing this. But she didn't have the baby till she was 90 years old. However, before that, you know what she did? She thought, you know what? I love God. I'm going to try to do some good, God, for you. Here, I'm going to get my servant right here, and she'll have a baby for me, and they'll technically be Abraham's baby then. And so she figured out a way through her own hands to make something happen. And guess what happened with that? That failed. That failed. That went wrong and went sour. Now she had her baby then, and God showed her that God could do what He said He could do. It didn't happen in the time frame that Sarah perhaps anticipated in, but God came through miraculously and provided baby Isaac through there. Okay, so again, not on her reserve, not on her body strength, but on God's strength, on God's word, on God's promise. Bank on God, not yourself. Realize He has the reserve to back up His word. Just like the dollar bill has gold to back up the dollar bill, God has His strength and His power to back up His word, His promises, His dreams. You have your own strength to back up what you say, but God has what He is saying to back up what He says. Right?